Hi everyone, welcome back to these processes from the project management body of knowledge. Now we're looking at planning our approach to stakeholder engagement. And as you can see, we've been through identifying our stakeholders really early on in our project. So when we're initiating our project, then we need to understand who the stakeholders are. And of course, now that we know who they are, and we'll be updating that over the life of our project as well, but we need to plan how we're going to keep them engaged and keep them supportive of our project so that we don't run into any bumps along the way. So planning stakeholder engagement is the process of developing approaches to involve project stakeholders based on their needs, their expectations, their interests in the project, and the potential impact that our project might have on them. And the key benefit is that it provides an actionable plan to interact effectively with those stakeholders. Let's look at the inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. We've got the project charter, of course, so that high-level view of who our stakeholders are, the project management plan, project documents, any agreements that are in place, and EEFs and OPAs. Tools and techniques that we'll see are our favorite, expert judgment, of course, from all the expertise that we'll need to gather from different people. Data gathering, data analysis, so when we're analyzing the stakeholders and their needs. Decision making, data representation, so we may need to represent those stakeholders in a certain way. Stakeholder engagement assessment matrix, for example, or mind mapping, where we're looking at a core central idea or a core stakeholder group and all the different stakeholders of that group. And then meetings to tie it all together as usual. The outputs that we'll see is the stakeholder engagement plan itself. And as you can see, planning stakeholder engagement really has that input back into the project management plan and that stakeholder engagement plan, of course. So an effective plan that recognizes diverse information needs of our stakeholders. Everyone is different and people will react differently, and we need to be aware of that as the project manager. So that's first developed after the initial stakeholder community has been identified right at the very beginning. And typical trigger situations requiring updates to our stakeholder management plan include maybe there's a new phase of the project, so there's different stakeholders involved. Maybe there's changes to an organizational structure. Maybe there's a restructure or a change in the project as well. Maybe there's changes to stakeholders in general, and when other outputs of the process areas require a review of the engagement strategies. So maybe the scope is changing, and so there's new people involved in our project. Let's look at the inputs in a little bit more detail. We've got the project charter, which contains that high-level view of the project purpose, success criteria, and of course, our stakeholders, which may evolve over time. The project management plan, where we've got the resource management plan, who are our resources, what is the schedule and the timeline that they are coming on board for our project, and what are their communication needs? And what are the risks involved? Are we going to have them at the right time? Is there a risk to them coming on board? Project documents like change logs or assumption logs, and issue logs. Who's raising an issue within our project? Is that a new stakeholder? Do we need to work with those stakeholders? The project schedule, any risks involved, and of course the actual stakeholder register, which may change over time. And then any agreements, so for the engagement of contractors or suppliers with our procurement. Then obviously we're going to need to work with that contracting group in the organisation to ensure those contractors and suppliers are effectively managed. Other inputs are our enterprise environmental factors. What's the environment that we're working in? The organizational culture, the political climate. So what are the politics in the organization you're working in? Maybe there's a clique of people who always work together and always agree, or maybe this part of the organization does not get along with this part of the organization, and so we need to find ways to bridge that gap. Stakeholder risk appetites. Is it high risk? Is it low risk? And then how do we manage that? Established communication channels. Is it formal communication? Is it informal? Can we have a side conversation? Can we have a meeting? Do we need to put something in writing? Do we need to do up proper meeting minutes? What is the actual process within the organization that you're working in? And of course, organizational process assets, where we've got communication requirements again, lessons learned repository, and any software tools that support effective stakeholder engagement. Tools and techniques that we'll need are expert judgment. So from expertise for people who might know about the politics and power structures within the organization. So can we check in with someone who's been working there for quite some time and understands how the work gets done? The culture of the organization, of course, and analytical or assessment techniques for stakeholder engagement. Is there an expert in those areas? Communication means or strategies, experts within the organization or the project that you're working in, and of course, knowledge from previous projects. Other tools and techniques are our famous meetings to help tie everything together. We can have meetings to analyze the input data of the stakeholder engagement planning process. How is it going? How do we need to engage them? What steps do we need to take? All of that will go into our stakeholder engagement plan. And of course, once we've gathered those different techniques, we need to make decisions. So that can include prioritization or ranking on those techniques. Stakeholder requirements need to be prioritized and ranked. So who is an important stakeholder from the perspective of their influence over your project? And then who just needs to be informed because maybe they need the information but they don't have a lot of influence, and that's okay as well. Data gathering will be needed again for that same reason. We're gathering all the data about the stakeholders, but we're also looking at benchmarking where the results of stakeholder analysis are compared with information from other organizations. So we've got our organization and maybe within our organization we can compare that to another similar organization. How did it go? Was it great, or did they do a better job? What can we learn from them? Data analysis as well, so any root cause analysis on problems or assumptions and constraints that we might come across. Data representation as well. We saw the mind map where we might have a key stakeholder group or a function and who are all the different people involved there, and that's our mind map where we've got that core idea in the center. And a stakeholder engagement assessment matrix where we've got our people down the side, and then we've got the different things that they can be. So they're unaware, they're resistant, they're neutral, supporting, or leading. And where are they currently? Unsupportive or unaware. And then where do we want them to be? Desired in supporting, for an example. And that is a great segue because that's our data representation here. So, here's stakeholder one, they're currently unaware, and ideally desired, D for desired, we want them to be supportive. Different ideas we've got are unaware, resistant, neutral, supportive, and leading. And you'll see this in the key concept videos as well. But obviously resistant is probably one of the worst ones that you can have. If they're unaware, that might be okay. We might be able to bring them on board, but resistant will take a lot more work to bring them around to being supportive or leading for your project. The outputs that we'll see for planning stakeholder engagement is the stakeholder management plan itself. So the stakeholder management plan is a component of our project management plan. We've got our project management plan and all of the different components, the risk management plan, scope, quality, schedule, cost. But this provides all the stakeholder actions and strategies to promote productive involvement of our stakeholders in decision making and execution throughout our project. And it can be formal or informal, like all of our plans. It could just be a few lines in a document, or it could be an entire document itself. So, depending on how large the project is, or depending on the organizational templates that we're already using as part of an organization. Stakeholder engagement plan may include strategies or approaches for engaging with individuals or groups of stakeholders. And those are all the bits and pieces that you'll see as part of planning stakeholder engagement from the project management body of knowledge.